What if I told you that one of the biggest threats to Stellantis, Ford, and GM's bottom line could suddenly vanish, and all because of a handshake deal between President Trump and Ontario's Premier Doug Ford? In a shocking move, Premier Ford just announced that Canada is willing to drop all tariffs instantly if President Trump agrees to do the exact same. And considering that Trump's 25% tariffs are set to hammer vehicles, parts, and engines imported from Canada starting this week, this could be a massive turning point for the U.S. auto industry. Okay, I'm over 40,000 friends, and 65% of you guys will keep watching by now you subscribe. Right now, the U.S. is firing off a new wave of tariffs, 25% on vehicles, major components, and even engines built in Canada. Now that directly affects Ford Super Duty trucks, which use Canadian-built engines for their gas versions, and then Mexico for the diesel versions. Now GM and Stellantis, they both build key models and parts in Ontario as well. Even Jeep production is paused up there at the Brampton assembly plant because how chaotic all this tariff talk has gotten. These aren't just minor hits. These are multi-billion-dollar headaches for these companies. Now Ford, Doug Ford, not the car company, just went on CNBC and basically called for a ceasefire. He said flat out, if Trump drops all his tariffs, we'll drop every single one of ours immediately. Now, he's not being very clear whether or not it's only the retaliatory tariffs he's talking about or the initial tariffs that Trump's been talking about for the past few months.
He calls it Liberation Day. I call it Termination Day because people are going to be losing their jobs across the U.S. You can't just all of a sudden put tariffs on every part and every widget that comes across the border. Ontario alone employs over 9 million people.
Do you think it's fair that you have tariffs on a whole number of products?
That's right. And we'd be willing to take those off tomorrow if he took all the tariffs off. We are not the problem, Andrew. Do you know the problem is? China's the problem. Andrew, let me be very clear. We didn't start this tariff war. You know, a tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. Simple as that.
But you've already got tariffs, Mr. Premier. You say you didn't start it. You already have all these existing tariffs that you're willing now to take off. We're putting them on today, right?
Let's just let this sink in. This isn't Canada just asking for a meeting. They're literally going on national TV and asking for a ceasefire. Zero tariffs. That could potentially be game over because Ontario alone is home to thousands of automotive jobs. They supply critical components, engines, and even entire vehicles that flow straight into the U.S. market, like the Chevy Silverado, the Chrysler Pacifica, and the new Dodge Charger. We're talking about an entire automotive supply chain that's been tightly integrated since the 1960s. One component might cross the US-Canadian border several times before it is finished and installed into a vehicle that might be imported back to America. Now, Premier Ford, he said that he talked directly to Secretary Lutnick that this tariff war is stupid. It's going to hurt both sides.
I had a conversation last week with Secretary Lutnick and just told him how we feel. It's going to hurt Americans. It's going to hurt American jobs. It's going to hurt investments. We've seen the market tumble. I'm sure it's going to start tumbling again today because people don't want uncertainty.
And he's right, but the problem is thousands of American workers have lost their jobs in the process because of existing agreements and tariffs. While I have several Canadian buddies that work for the Unifor Union, something has to give or there won't be much manufacturing left in the United States pretty much after the next decade. Now, if President Trump and Premier Ford can work on a deal to end all tariffs, this could save the automakers like Stellantis from a major meltdown. Now, Stellantis just got slapped in Europe for running an illegal recycling cartel. They were about to get hit with the largest fine of all the automakers until they got a discount for cooperating after their ex-baby Mercedes-Benz snitched on them to the European feds. Now, Stellantis also will suffer from Trump's tariffs in Mexico, especially on components and vehicles like the Jeep Recon, the Jeep Wagoneer S, the Jeep Cherokee, the Ram ProMaster, and the Ram HD trucks. So if Trump and Doug Ford can strike a deal, Stellantis can stop the bleeding at least one of the borders and refocus on fixing the Mexico tariffs, which I don't see happening because these companies bank on paying basic third world labor rates, even though the vehicle prices keep creeping up every single year. But it's just flat out crazy how prices on vehicles made between those two countries can be dramatically different. Let me give you an example. Now, the Jeep Wagoneer S and the Dodge Charger Daytona are essentially the exact same vehicle. They use the same batteries, the same electric motors, and they both ride on the same Stellar large platform. But the Wagoneer S is built in Mexico and the Charger Daytona is built up in Canada. Now, if you just look at this slide right here, just notice the price difference between both of them. And both of these are launch editions, so they're basically fully loaded vehicles. Why in the world is the Charger Daytona so much more expensive than the Wagoneer S? Then you look at Ram. You would think that the Ram HD trucks made in Mexico, for example, would corner the truck market with absurd low pricing when Ford builds their Super Duty with the evil money-hungry UAW and GM builds their Silverado HD up in Canada with another evil labor union that is money-hungry. So why do Ram HD trucks cost the same as trucks built in countries that is 10 times the labor rate of Mexico? I'm just saying. But the same goes for GM and Ford. Now, GM's Canadian operations, they play a huge role in building vehicles like the Silverado and the Silverado HD, but most of their cheap vehicles are made in Mexico, like the Sonic was, the Track, the actual Equinox, some of the Silverado trims, the Sierra, and some of the V8's inline fours, which means a lot of these vehicles that they were building very cheaply down there in Mexico with cheap labor is about to get a whole lot expensive with 25% tariffs. Ford is importing Super Duty gas engines and Mustang engines from Windsor up in Canada, and the Mexican operations is importing cheap versions of the Mach-E, the Bronco Sport, and the Little Maverick, and all the diesel engines that go into their $100,000 diesel trucks. All of them build components and profitable vehicles in Mexico, and they're all now facing a 25% penalty unless something changes. So this offer from Canada, it could be a lifeline for them because they know that these automakers will either move all operations to either Mexico to cut costs as much as possible, or move into America if bills like the Transportation Freedom Act actually passes that will give them a 200% tax deduction on every American worker's salary, or further tax breaks if the vehicle is produced like 75% in America. But it also exposes a major point that Mexico is the real problem in this whole equation. Doug Ford said it himself. Mexico is flooding the supply chain with cheap Chinese parts, slapping a made in Mexico label on it, and skirting right past trade restrictions. Now, I guess according to him, Canada is not doing that. Canada is buying American parts, selling to American buyers, building American vehicles, and keeping the playing field mostly fair. And he even wants to do away with the USMCA and just do a US-Canada agreement.
I think we need to sit down and let's get back to a USCA deal instead of USMCA deal, because Mexico is bringing in cheap parts from China, slapping on a made in Mexico sticker and costing American, Canadian jobs.
So what's the holdup? Honestly, it's probably just political theater because nobody wants to blink first. President Trump doesn't look like he's soft by dropping his tariffs first. Canada probably doesn't want to give in before the tariffs are lifted because they don't trust America anymore.
You're talking about the retaliatory tariffs that Trump's putting on, and you kind of keep dodging the point about the original tariffs that were already existing that Canada had. And why not get rid of those, and then maybe there wouldn't even be retaliatory tariffs? Why not do that first?
Well, I think he has to look at the tariffs that he's put on Canada.
But if both sides can claim victory, we might just avoid an all-out trade war between both countries. And I mean, let's be real here. This matters to pretty much everyone, whether you're buying a Ram, a Ford Super Duty truck, or even waiting to see if Stellantis brings back Hemi production to America. If tariffs goes away, we're going to get cheaper vehicles, cheaper trucks, smoother supply chains, and more factory jobs in both countries. And even a stronger shot at seeing like Dodge and Ram rebounding with V8 powered vehicles made in some North American area, whether it be Canada or America, and not canceled because they had to deal with their bottom line being affected with tariff-induced profit losses. So the bottom line to me is that Doug Ford just threw down a gauntlet. If Trump responds, it could reshape the entire North American auto market. But if they don't strike a deal soon, Ford, GM, Stellantis, and ultimately you, the buyer, will end up paying the price. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Should Trump take the deal and drop tariffs on Canada? Do you think Stellantis will finally get its act together and move Hemi production back to the United States, or maybe even Canada now, if they're going to drop all tariffs? And how will this affect the cars and trucks you're planning to buy? While you're here, you can go check out this video right here that basically breaks down the Transportation Freedom Act that could save the UAW and make vehicles cheaper and mostly in America. And until the next time, I'm out.